Most people think a prison sentence begins when the cell door closes. In reality, for some people in America, the sentence begins the moment the destination is decided. Because in the U.S. prison system, where you are sent can matter far more than how long you are sentenced. Two people can receive the same number of years on paper and live in completely different worlds once the gates shut behind them. One world still recognizes time, the other is designed to erase it. There are prisons in America that operate under an unspoken assumption that many of the people sent there will never fully return to society physically, mentally, or emotionally. Not because of what they did, but because of what the environment itself does to them. These are not places built for rehabilitation. They are places built for endurance. From the outside, they look like any other correctional facility: concrete walls, razor wire, guard towers, American flags flapping above the perimeter. But inside, the logic is different. The rules are different. The expectations are different. In these prisons, survival is not guaranteed. Stability is not expected. And release is treated as a technical possibility, not a goal. The people who end up here are often labeled the same way: high risk, violent, and manageable, beyond reform. Sometimes that label comes from a serious offense. Other times, it comes from behavior inside other prisons: fights, mental breakdowns, refusal to comply with authority. Once the label is applied, it follows them. Classification systems decide their fate quietly, using paperwork, internal reports, and risk assessments that are rarely explained and almost never challenged successfully. One transfer order can send someone hundreds or thousands of miles away from family, from lawyers, from any support system they had left. The move happens fast. No warning, no appeal, no explanation beyond a short phrase: security concerns. When they arrive, the rules change immediately. The cell is smaller, the door is heavier, the silence is louder. In some of America's worst prisons, prisoners spend most of their day alone, not as punishment, but as routine. Cells are designed to minimize interaction. Solid doors replace bars. Windows are narrow, frosted, or positioned too high to see anything meaningful. Light comes from fluorescent fixtures that never fully dim. Time stops behaving normally. Meals arrive through slots. Conversations happen through steel. Movement happens only when authorized, restrained, and monitored. Even medical care is delivered through barriers whenever possible. Human contact becomes an exception, and this is where the sentence truly begins, not with violence or chaos, but with control. Every movement is scheduled. Every sound is noticed. Every action is recorded. There is no privacy, yet there is total isolation. The architecture itself enforces compliance. Long corridors discourage speech. Thick walls swallow noise. Angles and blind spots eliminate the feeling of being seen by another human being. This is not accidental design. It is intentional. These prisons were built during an era when the system decided that unpredictability was the enemy. Riots, assaults, escapes, and lawsuits led to a single conclusion: if people are separated long enough, controlled tightly enough, chaos disappears. So separation became policy. Isolation became standard, and the psychological cost became collateral damage for the people sentenced into these places. The first weeks are often the most disorienting. The body adapts faster than the mind. The nervous system remains on edge, waiting for threats that never arrive or imagining ones that do. Silence becomes unbearable. Noise becomes terrifying. Sleep becomes fragmented. Days lose structure. Without meaningful interaction, the brain struggles to mark time. There are no conversations to remember. No shared experiences to anchor memory. Events blur together. Some people begin counting cracks in the wall. Others pace the same few steps for hours. Others stop moving altogether. Mental health services exist on paper. In practice, access is limited, delayed, or purely reactive. Treatment focuses on control medication to quiet symptoms, not therapy to address causes. Distress is not treated as injury. It is treated as noncompliance. Requests for help are often viewed with suspicion. Emotional breakdowns are documented as behavior problems. Self-harm can lead to more restriction, not less. The system does not ask why someone is breaking down. It asks how to contain them. Family contact becomes rare and strained. Phone calls are short, expensive, and monitored. Visits, if allowed at all, take place behind glass or through screens. Physical touch disappears. Relationships slowly erode. Life on the outside continues without them, while life inside remains frozen. Birthdays pass unnoticed. Children grow older through photographs. Deaths are reported weeks later, sometimes months. Grief has nowhere to go, and yet, these prisons continue to operate largely out of public view. They are geographically isolated, legally complex, and administratively shielded. Oversight exists, but it is limited. Transparency is minimal. What happens inside rarely becomes visible unless it ends in tragedy. Deaths are documented as natural causes. Breakdowns are labeled disciplinary issues. Years vanish into statistics. From the outside, the system appears stable. From the inside, it feels endless. And this is only the beginning, because beyond isolation lies something even more dangerous: neglect, unchecked violence, and systems that quietly stop intervening altogether. Places where the sentence is no longer about time served, but about whether someone survives long enough to serve it. In America's worst prisons, brutality does not always arrive with violence. Sometimes, it arrives quietly through absence. Absence of care, absence of urgency, absence of accountability. After the initial shock of confinement fades, prisoners begin to understand a deeper truth about these facilities: nothing is designed to get better. Problems are not solved, they are managed. Suffering is not corrected, it is absorbed into routine. This is where neglect becomes policy. Medical care is one of the first systems to reveal it. On paper, every prisoner has access to health care. In reality, access depends on staffing levels, security priorities, and administrative discretion. Requests are submitted in writing. Responses take days, weeks, sometimes months. Pain is triaged by convenience. Chronic conditions worsen slowly. Untreated infections and managed diabetes, deteriorating vision. Dental issues are common and severe. A toothache can last months before extraction is approved. Mental health care is even thinner. Psychologists are overwhelmed. Appointments are brief and infrequent. Therapy, when offered, is often conducted through doors or screens. Medication becomes the default solution, not because it heals, but because it suppresses. Side effects are ignored. Complaints are documented and dismissed. In these environments, deterioration is gradual and invisible. Until it isn't, emergencies happen, but response times vary. Security protocols often override medical urgency. Before help arrives, clearance must be granted. Doors must be unlocked. Escorts must be assembled. Minutes stretch. Sometimes, help arrives too late. Deaths inside these prisons rarely look dramatic. There are no riots, no alarms heard by the public. The body is found during count. An unresponsive prisoner is wheeled out. Cause of death is recorded. Paperwork is filed. Operations resume. Families are notified later. Questions receive standardized answers. Accountability dissolves into procedure. Violence, when it occurs, follows a similar pattern. In some facilities, isolation reduces prisoner-on-prisoner assaults. In others, long-term tension explodes unpredictably. With limited programming and constant psychological pressure, aggression has nowhere to go. When violence happens, investigations are internal. Reports are written by the same system responsible for preventing it. Surveillance footage may be incomplete, unavailable, or restricted. The narrative is controlled. Staff shortages make everything worse. Overworked officers rotate frequently. Institutional knowledge disappears. New staff rely on rigid enforcement rather than judgment. Rules replace discretion. Force replaces communication. This creates an environment where mistakes escalate quickly. A missed instruction becomes defiance. Defiance becomes restraint. Restraint becomes injury. And injuries are often treated as disciplinary matters. Grievance systems exist, but they are slow and limited. Complaints are reviewed internally. Appeals are rare. Retaliation, subtle or overt, is a constant fear. Filing a grievance can mark someone as a problem. So many stay silent. Neglect also appears in daily living conditions. Cells deteriorate. Plumbing fails. Mold spreads. Temperatures fluctuate to extreme sweltering in summer, freezing in winter. Complaints go unanswered. Maintenance is deferred indefinitely. Food quality declines. Meals are nutritionally minimal, repetitive, and often cold. Special diets are inconsistently provided. Hunger becomes part of the routine. These are not accidents. They are consequences of prioritization. Budgets favor security infrastructure over human care. Oversight focuses on compliance metrics, not lived experience. As long as incidents remain within acceptable limits, conditions persist. The system does not collapse under neglect. It stabilizes around it. Over time, prisoners adapt not by improving, but by lowering expectations. Pain becomes normal. Discomfort becomes constant. The idea of care feels abstract. Hope becomes dangerous. Because hope creates disappointment, and disappointment is harder to survive than resignation. This is especially true for aging prisoners. As bodies weaken, the environment becomes more hostile. Mobility declines, but cells do not change. Stairs remain. Hard surfaces remain. Assistance is minimal. Compassionate release exists in theory. In practice, it is rare, slow, and bureaucratic. Applications move through layers of review. Many die waiting for decisions. Death becomes administrative. For those serving long sentences or indefinite ones, the future shrinks. There are no milestones, no programs to complete, no timeline to track, just endurance. And endurance, over years, reshapes identity. People stop thinking in terms of goals. They think in terms of survival. Avoiding trouble, avoiding pain, avoiding attention. Life becomes smaller. The system interprets this as stability. But stability built on neglect is fragile, because beneath the surface, damage accumulates physically, mentally, emotionally. And when it finally surfaces, it often does so violently, tragically, or irreversibly. This is not failure by accident. It is failure by design. And beyond neglect lies something even more final: the reality of death row, permanent isolation, and sentences that are never expected to conclude. Places where the system no longer plans for a future at all. In America's worst prisons, there is a point where the system stops pretending. Rehabilitation disappears from the language. Release stops being planned for. Time loses meaning. This is where sentences are no longer about punishment. They are about ending. Death row is the clearest example. Popular culture portrays death row as a place of final moments, a countdown to execution. In reality, it is something far more psychologically destructive: indefinite waiting. People on death row do not live toward a date. They live inside uncertainty. Execution dates are scheduled, postponed, canceled, and rescheduled. Appeals stretch for decades. Hope appears briefly, then collapses. The mind is forced to prepare for death repeatedly, sometimes dozens of times. This process breaks people long before the body fails. Many prisoners on death row spend over 23 hours a day alone. Cells are smaller. Movement is minimal. Human contact is controlled and sparse. Silence becomes constant. The isolation is not incidental. It is policy. The stated purpose is safety. The actual effect is psychological erosion. Memory declines. Concentration fades. Emotional regulation collapses. Some forget details of their own cases. Some lose the ability to hold conversations. Some begin speaking to walls as years turn into decades. Prisoners age inside environments never designed for aging. Arthritis worsens, vision fades, mobility declines, medical care struggles to keep up if it tries at all. Executions are sometimes carried out on people who no longer fully understand why they are there. Beyond death row, there are sentences that function similarly: permanent isolation units, life without parole placements, and indefinite administrative segregation. These are places where the system quietly accepts that people will die inside. There is no long-term plan, no rehabilitation pathway, no meaningful review. People are warehoused, not held. When deaths occur in these environments, they are rarely investigated publicly. They are categorized as natural causes, complications, or incidents resolved internally. Families receive calls. Paperwork is completed. The institution continues. The system does not pause. This is where the American prison system reveals its most uncomfortable truth. Some people are not expected to survive incarceration in any meaningful sense, not physically, not mentally, not socially. They are expected to disappear. And because these prisons are isolated geographically and politically, the public rarely sees the outcome. There are no cameras, no regular reporting, no urgency. Out of sight becomes out of conscience. The damage, however, does not stay contained. Families carry unanswered questions for years. Children grow up without closure. Communities absorb trauma quietly. Former prisoners, when released, struggle to function in a world that feels unreal. The cost spreads outward. Yet these prisons continue to operate, funded and justified under the language of safety, order, and justice. But justice requires purpose. Punishment without rehabilitation is containment. Containment without care is neglect. Neglect without accountability becomes cruelty. The question is no longer whether these prisons are harsh. The question is whether a system that expects people to die inside slowly, quietly, forgotten can still claim moral authority. Because once a sentence is designed to erase the person serving it, the punishment does not end at incarceration. It becomes something else entirely. And those places still exist. They are still operating. And people are still being sentenced into them. Not with an execution date, but with an expectation.